Hi guys, welcome to another of our quick tip videos. Now in this one I'm going to show you how to bench test a starter motor. Now if you take your starter motor out of the vehicle and you want to test your starter, first thing you have to do, you need to have a look at the top of the solenoid where all the connections are coming into it. The main one from the battery, the plus, and the little connection, the signal from the ignition switch. Now have a look at them first. And if you see something like that, like this solenoid is taking off a bad starter, this solenoid is actually very bad. As you can tell, this connection where it was joined with the big wire from the battery is very bad. You see, it's rusty, dirty looking. Same with this one, which this is the connection where the lead from the motor comes to. Both of them are very bad. There was no connectivity there whatsoever. In turn, this starter, this solenoid is out of it's a new solenoid basically, and as you can see you have a nice shiny surface here and it doesn't look too bad. Now you can tell by the look of it that the connections there are very good. Now another thing you might want to do is, when you have your starter out, this connection which comes from the motor to the connection on the solenoid, just make sure the lead is actually intact, because sometimes they do overheat and fall apart. The lead which comes from the body of the starter onto the solenoid. And what happens as well is this connection, where this nut which holds the wire, sometimes the connection there goes bad. So what you want to do is you want to take this nut off, most time they are 13s, clean up the connection and put it back together, and that will make sure this connection is okay. Now after we checked this connection, make sure it's nice and shiny, and we checked our wire going from the motor that's intact and where it's joined with the solenoid is clean, it's time to have a look at the little one there. Now guys, different vehicles, different starters, different solenoids, they can have a different ways how the ignition signal wire is connected to the solenoid. On most cases it's a bolt, like in this one. It's M6 bolt, and some of them is M5 bolt. Other ones have a push-on connection, like this one here. See, that's your push-on here. Now, if it's a push-on, what you want to do is you want to have a good look at it. Make sure it's nice and clean. Now, for example, if you have a good look at this one, you will see two lines there. Them lines on this push-on were made by the spade that goes into the push-on. Now if I move it around, you can see the light reflecting off it. That means this connection was actually quite good. Now I have a solenoid here where in this solenoid you can see them two lines as well, but them lines are pretty bad and they are loose, because as you can see they are very irregular. It means that could be your problem. This connection could be your problem, and all what you have to do is clean that up and maybe squeeze the push-on tiny bit, so as it goes in it tightens itself. And the other solenoids might have a plug on it, like this one. Square plug, there's a little push-on inside. Them push-ons usually don't go bad because the plug holds the push-on solid, so there's no way for the push-on to vibrate in any sort of way. Now guys, some starters, like this one I'm holding in my hand now, could look quite unusual, but they all work. They all work on the same principle. You have your main connection from the battery. You have your little push on here, which is the signal from the ignition switch, and here you have the wire going from the motor onto the solenoid. Where in this starter the solenoid is located here. So this is your wire going from the motor. And it doesn't matter what kind of starter it is, how it looks. They all work of the same principle. You have two main connections, battery one. You have other big one which goes from the motor, and you have the signal from the ignition switch. Now when we have our solenoid diagnosed, if you have a good look at it, see everything is clean, everything looks nice and tight, now it's time to test it. If you have your starter mounted into the device and you have grounded device, just make sure the starter gets the ground, because sometimes what happens, even if the starter is in the device or the lead is clamped onto the starter, it doesn't mean that the connection there is good. It might actually lack of the ground. It might not work for you. It might be very misleading. Now guys, let's move on and test our starter. Now this is our positive lead. We clamp it on the top connection, the connection which is opposite to the one where the lead joins. from the motor. Clamp that onto it. Now the next step is we have our little wire. This is positive from the same battery. You can from the same battery. This is going to imitate the signal from the ignition switch. Now if you don't have a wire or something like that, the simple thing to do is you just need to cross the big one here with the small one, which is our ignition. But by using the lead, it just makes it handier to just energize the solenoid and make sure the starter works. Now guys, when we're going to test our starter, what we have here, it's a voltmeter. Now this voltmeter is connected up to the battery, which we are going to use to test the starter. Now if you don't have a voltmeter, it doesn't matter, you don't need to have a voltmeter to actually bench test the starter. Now, get the voltmeter connected to the battery. Now, and as you can see, this battery is charged quite well. It's 12.5 volts. Now, if you're using, it doesn't matter what kind of battery you're using, you want the battery to be charged for over 12 volts. If it's below 12 volts, the test mightn't be valid. Now we are going to energize the solenoid by putting the power into the small connection here on the solenoid. And just take a notice of how low the voltage drops, and look at the pinion, what the pinion does. Now, as you can see, the voltage when the starter was running dropped by about 1.5 volts. Now that's what you want. That's the kind of, if you're using voltmeter to do that test, what you want to see that kind of a droppage. If it drops more than 1.5 volts, if it drops to, let's say, 8, 9, even 6 volts, it means the starter is actually bad and there's a problem with it, like bushings or brushes, or something is wrong with the starter. Where if it drops maybe volt, 1.5, it means the starter is okay. Now, and as you have seen, when we are testing our starter, the pinion came out and was spinning. That's what you want to see. So let's do it once more. Now guys, after a test like that, we are 100% sure the starter is okay. The pinion comes out, starter spins, the voltage doesn't drop for too low. It means the starter, the coils, the windings and the armature are good enough. The bushings mightn't be, the bushings aren't worn, because if they were, the load on the starter would be much heavier and the voltage will drop much lower. Now, if you're not sure if the pinion in your starter is faulty or not, have a look at our other video with where we show how to check pinion and make sure it's okay.